Well, hello. It is 2025. Can you believe that we are a quarter century through this millennium? Wow. Anyway, I have another verse for us for us to discuss, and this is Romans chapter 2. I think it's an interesting chapter, but the verse I'm going to look at is 28. And the reason I picked this verse is because I have personally been asked the question before. Well, on the line of replacement theology, well, what about that verse that says that, it's not a Jew who is one outwardly but one inwardly, and so in a sense people are using this to consider themselves spiritual Israel because of this verse. So I guess let's take a look at it. Here it is. For no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly, nor is circumcision outward and physical, but a Jew is one inwardly, and circumcision is a matter of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter. Several things, I guess, to think about in this reading. And that is, we're dealing with several things. So for no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly. Is he saying that people who are circumcised are not Jews? No, that's not what he's saying. What he's getting to in this is he's building an argument around the fact that it's not just those who are circumcised, it's those who actually practice, those who actually do the works of the law, if you will, that are Jews, right? So it's circumcision in of itself doesn't make anyone righteous. It is the actions of the individual that verify the righteousness of that individual. And we will see this in chapter 2 as we go back through here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll show you basically where he's coming from. Okay, so for all who have sinned without the law will also perish without the law. This argument he is making, basically saying Gentiles who weren't under the law aren't going to be judged by the law. It's the hearers of the law who are judged for it. And then he makes the case here in verse 13, for it's not just the hearers that are righteous before God, but the doers who will be justified, right? You have to actually do the law. You actually have to practice it to be justified by the law. And then it makes the case here that Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires, which is love, okay, God and love each other. They are a law to themselves. In other words, there's this law within us that is teaching us at least basic righteousness. Even though they do not have the law, they show that the work of the law is written in their hearts, while their conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them on the day when, according to my gospel, God judges the secrets of men by Jesus Christ. But if you call yourself a Jew and rely on the law and boast in God and know his will and approve what is excellent because you're instructed from the law, and if you are sure that you yourself are a guide to the blind, a light to those who are in darkness, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of the children, having in the law the embodiment of knowledge and truth, then you who teach others, do you not teach yourself? While you preach against stealing, do you steal? You who say that one must not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob temples? You who boast in the law dishonor God by breaking the law. For as it is written, the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you. For circumcision indeed is of value if you obey the law, but if you break the law, your circumcision becomes uncircumcision. So if a man who is uncircumcised keeps the precepts of the law, will not his uncircumcision be regarded as circumcision? Then he who is physically uncircumcised but keeps the law will condemn you, who have the written code and circumcision but break the law. For no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly. Okay, this is the argument to this whole point. It is not enough that we, let's say, for instance, do it this way. As Jewish people, God gave you the law to obey the law. You can't just say, look, I'm a circumcision, I know the truth of God, and yet do not do good, do not follow the commandments and things of that nature. It is not saying, however, that magically God does not consider them to be Jewish because of Paul's argument here. It is simply stating, as I understand it, that if you're going to be a true Jew, if you will, keep the law. That's kind of the argument he's making. And then he says that if Gentiles do the things that are in the law, even though they're uncircumcised, people still would count them as righteous. And if you will, quote unquote, circumcised, because they are doing righteous things. So in and of itself, circumcision isn't going to save you. That's essentially what he's trying to say. And then he goes on and makes the point the rest of the chapter. Now, the reason I discuss this is because people are using these types of scriptures to lessen what circumcision meant for the Jews and that God has called them out as a people. And they try to basically discredit, saying, well, since they rejected Jesus, they are forsaken by God, and they aren't true Jews. We who aren't Jews, but, keep God's quote-unquote law, not Torah, but, follow the commandments of Jesus, are the new Jew, or the new spiritual Jew, or spiritual Israel. That's where often this goes. And I will also bring up another verse that segues into this, that I think is often misunderstood as well. And it has to do with the churches in Revelation. And just give me a second to find it here. Here it is in Revelation. This plays into it. I'm sure I'm going to do a separate episode just on this reference because it is so potent. It is so used maliciously. And for whatever reason, people thrive on this sort of thing. But if we look at this, for instance, in Revelation chapter 2, there's actually two references we'll look at here in Revelation. But this is a very famous one, right? So, and to the angel of the church of Smyrna write, the words of the first and the last, who died and came to life, I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich. And the slander of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. So this is I guess one of these verses again where people there's a different way to read this one. I remember the days where I would read this verse and I would have assumed, based upon the verse we just read in Romans, but you are rich, and the slander of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. I would have assumed that is actually referring to the Jewish people. They say they're Jews, but they're not Jews. They're not good Jews. They're a synagogue of Satan. That is what I used to understand about this verse. However, that is actually not the historical reality here. What he is talking about in the case of the church of Smyrna, and then later we'll read another passage, is that there are people who say that they're Jews, and they're actually not Jews, right? They're pretenders. They're imposters. And he goes on to call these imposters a synagogue of Satan. So that changes the dynamic a lot, because those who claim to be spiritual Israel or spiritually Jews are claiming to be Jews and actually aren't. So in a weird paradigm, one could argue that the argument I just was pointing out with the other scripture and this combined, that people are doing the very sin this is describing, and that is actually scary. Now, again, it happens in another case, and I'll go to it here. All right, here we go again. This is further down in chapter 3. We have this kind of reference again by John. And to the angel of church of Philadelphia write the words of the Holy One, the true one, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one will open. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Behold, I will make those, again, synagogue of Satan, who say that they are Jews and are not. What are they doing? But lie. They're lying. They're saying they're Jews and they're not. This isn't some weird interpretation where all of a sudden you have, people who, again, based on the verse we read in Romans, who are, they say they're Jews, but they're not really Jews because they're not obedient, and because they didn't accept Jesus, they're not real Jews. They're lying. They're the synagogue of Satan. Again, that's how I used to interpret it years ago. It's evil. It's malicious. It's a very malicious way to interpret the scripture. What it is saying is that we should not claim to be Jewish if we're not. We shouldn't lie about it. We shouldn't claim to be Israelite if we're not. We shouldn't lie about it. And we should respect them for who they are. And the association of that these people who are lying, saying they are Jews, both references here in Revelation, John calls that, in the words of Jesus, a synagogue of Satan. This is a radically powerful statement. Now, why do I say that? Because this is really a precursor to replacement theology. What do I mean? So the first part of replacement theology or supersessionism is to, in fact, believe, for whatever reason, that the Jews have blown it, that they have committed some kind of unpardonable offense, the covenant has been broken with them, and they truly are no longer the children of God. And now you have an imposter who comes in, and claims we are the real Jews because we believe in Jesus. We are the spiritual Israel. We are the spiritual seed of Abraham. There's an argument for the children of Abraham by faith statement. However, when we impose ourselves and impostor ourselves in that position, and we say we are Jews and aren't, what does Jesus call that? That is the assembly of Satan. Think about that for just a little bit. What groups hold to supersessionism the strongest in our world today? And I don't mean this in any offense. I just want you to understand they readily preach this, so I'm not doing this to be offensive. I'm just pointing it out. Islam believes they have replaced Israel. The Catholic Church believes they have replaced Israel. The Orthodox Church believes they have replaced Israel. And so one has to ask the question, if they believe that they are spiritual Jews and the spiritual children of Israel, or the spiritual children of God, and have replaced the Jews, does this other statement, does this other condition apply? Are they the congregation of the adversary if they hold to such a view? And I would submit that that is the case. If we look at the religion of the Antichrist in general, this was a bit eye-opening to me as I was looking at the whole Antichrist phenomenon. You really have a narrative in Scripture that I've spoken of many times, and when we have a narrative in Scripture, the narrative is the redemption of Israel, and through the Messiah, and also the redemption of nations and people of the nations who see the light and come to the light. But ultimately, he's a Jewish Messiah, and he's going to save Israel. And we are joined to that salvation, so it's a wonderful thing. But when we supplant, when we put ourselves into the position and say that we are now the chosen people and the elect, we are actually lying, and we could be giving ourselves to what I would classify as the most likely the message of the false messianic message, or the Antichrist, this false messianic narrative that somehow Israel has been replaced. I believe that it is a demonic message. I believe that it is an evil message, and it's Antichrist to believe that. That's maybe a little rich for some people, but I believe I have precedent to say that because, again, as it says here, those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. All right? He's not speaking about Jews here. He's saying those who say they are, but they're not, and they're lying. So anyway, those are strong words. And I think it goes without saying that we should go back to Romans 11 just briefly, because Paul kind of corrects some of his stronger statements that he builds throughout the book. And so there in 2, when he's challenging the nature of circumcision, I think it's not more than fair to also look at this just briefly. I asked, then, has God rejected his people? No. I am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not rejected his people who he foreknew. So I read this before. We have to remember that. We also have to remember that Gentiles are grafted in. It is not that they stumbled that they would fall, but know that they're through their trespass, salvation has come to the Gentiles so as to make Israel jealous. And if their trespass means riches for the world and their failure means riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their full inclusion mean? So in short, we have to remember that we are branches grafted into the root, as Paul puts it aptly here, that we are joined with natural branches. We are wild branches. We're joined to this root being Israel. And it's not us that support the root, but it supports us. And some people can say, well, it's Messiah and things of that nature. It is true. But this is really talking about Israel. So if God doesn't spare natural branches that don't bring forth fruit, he won't spare us either, and etc. We know this. And the mystery of Israel's salvation, he touches on it briefly. I don't want you to be unaware of this mystery. He said, a partial hardening has come upon Israel. Notice it's partial until the fullness of the Gentiles has come. In this way, all Israel will be saved. Deliverer will come from Zion. He will banish all ungodliness from Jacob. And this will be my covenant with them when I take away their sins. This is talking about Zechariah. So, as far as the good news of the kingdom, they are enemies for your sake. But as regards to election, they are beloved for the sake of their forefathers. For the gifts and callings of God are not revocable. You cannot revoke them. All right, so please take that to heart. To not claim to be something that we're not. It's not smart, according to Scripture. And I guess consider that Paul is building an argument that circumcision alone is not enough for salvation, that you actually have to have works. People, again, the works of the Messiah, who gave himself for our righteousness, that those who believe on him will be saved, right? But in short, the law is not just a suggestion. We are not allowed to murder. We are not allowed to commit adultery. We're not allowed to be idolaters. Those are tangible actions that even in the new covenant have not gone away. And so it is very fair to say that it is not faith only that saves, but those who put away sin. And what I also want to say about that, yes, we are saved by faith alone, not by works, lest any man should boast. But as James says, faith without works is dead. So in other words, if you don't keep the righteousness, which is abiding by the righteous ethic of God, then we are not righteous. So there will be fruit manifesting in our lives. So anyway, that's all I have for today. God bless you. And I hope you enjoy these, and I will keep them coming.